One day before the first successful airplane flight, the world still moved on wheels, rails, hooves, and water. It was December 16th, 1903. In cities, horses pulled delivery wagons beside electric streetcars, bicycles, and the occasional automobile. Across continents, trains carried people, newspapers, and mail. Across oceans, steamships measured journeys in days and weeks. The sky was visible to everyone, but usable by almost no one. On a cold, empty stretch of North Carolina sand, two bicycle makers stood beside a machine that had already crashed once. By the next morning, 12 seconds above the ground would turn the sky from scenery into a destination. To understand that final day, forget the world we know. There were no airports, no airline tickets, no departure boards, no pilots carrying hundreds of strangers across an ocean while they slept. Distance still had weight. A letter crossing a country depended on trains, schedules, weather, and human hands. In rural America, horse-drawn wagons carried mail along difficult roads. In the largest cities, pedestrians, carriages, streetcars, bicycles, and a few early automobiles competed for the same space. The automobile itself had not yet become ordinary. The Ford Model T was still 5 years away. For long journeys, the railroad ruled the land. For the ocean, the steamship ruled the horizon. A person leaving Europe for America did not disappear into an airport and emerge hours later. The voyage required preparation, money, patience, and days at sea. Families understood distance as separation. Governments understood distance as delay. Armies could move by rail and ship, but oceans and mountains still imposed hard limits. And yet, the dream of flight was everywhere. It appeared in stories, scientific clubs, balloons, gliders, exhibitions, and machines that looked convincing until the moment they were tested. Only 8 days earlier, one of the most famous attempts had ended in public humiliation. Samuel Langley, the respected head of the Smithsonian Institution, had built a full-size flying machine with support from the United States War Department and the Smithsonian. The project had money, prestige, government attention, and newspaper coverage. On December 8th, its pilot was launched from a platform on the Potomac River. The machine collapsed and dropped into the freezing water. The pilot escaped. The newspapers laughed. The army withdrew its support. To many readers, the lesson seemed obvious. Another flying machine had failed. Perhaps the dream was still ahead of its time. But while the public watched the expensive experiment in Washington, almost no one was watching the quieter experiment on the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Wilbur and Orville Wright were not senior government scientists. They were bicycle builders from Dayton, Ohio. They had financed their work themselves. For years, they had tested kites and gliders because they understood something others often missed. Leaving the ground was not enough. A flying machine had to obey the person inside it. Their flyer was not a polished symbol of the future. It was wood, fabric, wire, chain, an engine, 2 propellers, and a system of controls assembled far from the crowds. And it had already failed. On December 14th, Wilbur made the first powered attempt. The flyer left its rail, climbed too sharply, lost speed, and struck the sand. The damage was repairable, but the attempt was not the controlled flight they were seeking. So December 16th became a day of repair, waiting, and uncertainty. The machine rested near a small camp in a landscape shaped by sand and wind. There was no audience waiting for history, no government delegation, no cheering crowd, only the brothers, a few people from the nearby life-saving station, and a machine that still had not proved it could do what it had been built to do. That is what history looked like one day before the event. Not inevitable, not celebrated, not even widely noticed, just unfinished. The next morning was cold and windy. The brothers waited, hoping the wind might weaken. It did not. By around 10 o'clock, they decided to try anyway. They signaled men from the nearby life-saving station. Orville placed a camera on a tripod and showed John T. Daniels how to trigger it. Then the flyer was positioned on its launching rail. At approximately 10:35 in the morning, Orville released the restraining wire. The machine moved forward. Wilbur ran beside the wing. Then the flyer rose. The flight was not smooth. The airplane pitched up and down as Orville worked unfamiliar controls in a strong, irregular wind. 12 seconds later, it touched the ground, 120 feet from where it had started. That distance was shorter than the length of many modern passenger aircraft, but the number was not the point. The machine had taken off under its own power. A pilot had controlled it. It had moved through the air and landed beyond its starting point. The brothers flew 3 more times that morning. Each flight went farther. On the 4th attempt, Wilbur remained in the air for 59 seconds and traveled 852 feet. Then a gust caught the flyer on the ground and damaged it beyond easy repair. The first successful airplane would never fly again. The brothers sent a brief telegram home. The news leaked, and an early newspaper report added false and exaggerated details. Other papers repeated them. The achievement was so unfamiliar that many editors did not understand what had actually happened. The world did not stop. Markets opened. Trains ran. Ships left port. Horses pulled wagons through winter streets. December 18th did not look like the beginning of a new age, but the age had begun. The Wrights still had to turn proof into a practical machine. During 1904 and 1905, they kept flying, improving control, increasing distance, and learning how to remain in the air. By 1905, they had produced an airplane capable of sustained, repeatable flight. Still, belief came slowly. The United States Army initially rejected their offers without properly examining the aircraft. Foreign governments showed interest. Public demonstrations in 1908 finally made denial difficult. Crowds watched airplanes turn, circle, carry passengers, and land. The machine was no longer a rumor from an empty beach. Governments quickly understood one of its darkest possibilities. An aircraft could observe territory from above. It could cross obstacles, follow armies, and eventually carry weapons. In 1909, the United States Army accepted its first airplane. Only a few years later, aircraft entered war. The sky that had once represented freedom also became a battlefield. But another future was forming beside the military one. Mail began to move through the air. Government mail contracts gave early aviation an economic purpose before enough passengers trusted it. Pilots followed roads and railway lines because navigation instruments were primitive. At night, bonfires and beacons helped mark the way. Flying remained dangerous, uncomfortable, and expensive. Yet every route made the map feel slightly smaller. Then passengers followed the mail. Airports appeared. Weather services improved. Governments created pilot licenses, safety rules, airways, and eventually air traffic control. The airplane stopped being only a machine. It became a system. Runways, control towers, radio communication, mechanics, flight attendants, schedules, and international agreements grew around it. By the 1930s, passenger aviation was expanding rapidly. Aircraft became larger, enclosed, faster, and more reliable. People who had once crossed countries by train could now watch the landscape pass beneath them. But progress carried a cost. The two world wars accelerated aircraft design with terrifying speed. Engines grew more powerful, navigation improved. Bombers carried destruction far behind front lines. Fighters turned the sky into a place where nations fought for control. The technology that reduced distance also allowed violence to travel farther and arrive faster. After the Second World War, military advances moved into civilian life. Larger airliners carried more passengers. Pressurized cabins, radar, and air traffic control helped organize increasingly crowded skies. In 1952, the first commercial jet service began. In 1969, the Boeing 747 made its first flight. Its size and range helped move long-distance air travel beyond the wealthy and toward the mass market. That same year, humans landed on the moon. Only about 65 years separated the Wrights' 12-second flight from the first human footsteps on another world. Apollo 11 even carried small pieces of wood and fabric from the original Wright flyer to the lunar surface. The line from Kitty Hawk did not end at the edge of a continent. It continued beyond Earth. Today, aviation is woven into ordinary life so completely that we notice it most when it stops. A family can live on different continents and still meet within a day. Fresh food can cross oceans before it spoils. Aircraft move patients, organs, vaccines, emergency teams, and disaster supplies across distances that once made help impossible. They fight wildfires, study storms, map forests, carry global cargo, and connect cities whose people may never meet by land or sea. Flight changed travel, trade, migration, tourism, science, medicine, war, and the human expectation of speed. It did not remove distance. It changed what distance means. Yet all of that was invisible on December 16, 1903. There was only a repaired machine on cold sand. No airport surrounded it. No industry depended on it. No passenger had purchased a ticket. No one could look up and see a road connecting cities through the clouds. One day before, the sky was still mostly a boundary. One day later, it had become a place. The first flight lasted 12 seconds. The consequences are still in the air.